What's up guys, welcome to this episode of Talking Poodoo, a Star Wars show, where I'm talking all about Star Wars Resistance Reborn by Rebecca Roanhorse, I think it's pronounced. I don't know, maybe not. This book is set after the events of Star Wars The Last Jedi and before the events of Star Wars The Rise of the Skywalker, and it's all about how the Resistance went from being just one ship with a small crew to what we assume are going to be a big fleet in The Rise of Skywalker. So overall, what did I think of this? I thought it was a good book. Yeah, it's really fast-paced, really just to the point, really fun, energetic, and that's kind of at odds with like a lot of the other books. A lot of the books in the Star Wars franchise, the expanded franchise, are much more like dramatic and character-focused, and they're less like the films and more focused on one individual or a group or something, and they often don't feel like the films. This one does, and it tells an important story as well, because after Last Jedi there is going to be a time jump between Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. A lot of stuff needs to happen there to set up The Rise of Skywalker, because from what we've seen in the trailers, they do go from one ship to a fleet of ships, and how does that happen exactly? There's a lot that needs to be going on, and this book delves into how that gets started. This is set, I believe, just a few days after The Last Jedi, so it's closer to The Last Jedi than it is to The Rise of Skywalker. But I mentioned how it's very fast-paced. There's no filler in this book as well. This feels like a culmination of the expanded universe, because there are characters from video games and other books and comic books and films even popping up here. This feels like, right, The Rise of Skywalker is the big culmination for the films. This is the book that's doing that for the books and the expanded universe as a whole. And it makes it really enjoyable, because like, oh, I know that character from this thing, or I know that character from this thing, oh, you mentioned in this event which was in this thing. So if you, like me, have been embracing the expanded universe, you're going to get a lot out of this. And because the book is so short and there isn't any filler, it means that when characters are popping up from other things, you're getting a very brief, like, right, this is who this character is. If you haven't read this comic book or you haven't played this video game, here's a brief summary of who they are, and that's it. It's not going into huge details about it, because all the other content has already been done. We know their backstory and we know their development from wherever they're originally from, so it doesn't need to delve into it too much here. Which means that this book is probably not going to work too well as a standalone. If you haven't embraced any of the expanded universe before, maybe avoid this book. It will work, you will get an idea of who every character is, but there'll be just so much missing if you haven't related it to the past entries into the expanded universe. But let's actually talk about a bit more specifics about this. So the first half of the book is really about them reeling from the events of The Last Jedi. Then they gather a plan, then they pull off the plan. And without going into spoilers, the finale is great. It feels like a finale of a Star Wars film. There's like 3 tiers of action going on. There's characters in one location doing something, characters in another one, and so on and so forth. Really exciting, really action-packed stuff going on there. It makes for a thrilling, enjoyable book. The one thing I didn't like about this book is the villains. The villains, there's like the main Resistance storyline, which focuses so much on Poe Dameron, but then you've got Snap Wexley and there's other characters who I won't name. But then there's this other arc that's going on throughout the book, focusing on this villain's character called Winsher. And this is the weakest part of the book. The character's not that interesting. It often, by the end of the book, it felt completely unimportant and unnecessary, because it could have just been a random First Order Imperial guy, and it's fine to add some backstory and development in there, but there's like 4 or 5 chapters in this book specifically focused on this character and characters associated with this character, and then a particular group which I think is going to be a little important heading forward in Star Wars. But yeah, it just didn't work. It felt like it was distracting away from the actual real action going on, and it didn't feel like it needed all of the attention on this character quite so much. And speaking of the First Order, one of the interesting things is that the films, Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, it's really unclear how big the First Order is Are they just a fleet in space? Have they got their hands and claws into different planets and societies and so on? And well, it turns out, yeah, it's the latter. The First Order is now essentially just the Empire again. After the events of The Last Jedi, they have started taking over planets. They've got their own systems under their control. And yeah, that's kind of disappointing because it's like, right, the Empire failed, and now you're just repeating it. Have you not learnt anything from that? It's like try and try again kind of thing, but eventually you're going to have to pick up on things that do and don't work. So it's a bit weird how the First Order is just essentially the Empire again. But let's talk about the characters. One of the things I liked about this is that this does feature characters from the films, from other books, from video games, from comic books and so on. And it's the first of the major entries into the expanded universe to have Rey and Finn in there as main characters. So that's interesting. Sadly, Rey and Finn don't have much to do. In fact, for the most part, them characters they're just kind of there. Finn accompanies Poe throughout a lot of the book. He's there pulling off his one-liners and being a bit of a loudmouth, fast-speaking individual. Frantic, I would say, is the word for it. Whereas Rey is there being awkward, being quirky and cute, but she's kind of just in the background, hanging around with Leia for the whole book. And it's clear that the writer of this book doesn't really know where their storylines are going, and that's why they've limited what they're doing here. So that's a bit disappointing, but it's understandable. At least they're there, and they do get stuff to do. But in speaking about that, the writer does a really, really good job of capturing their personalities. Like I said, how Rey is quirky and odd and awkward, that comes across really well. And how Finn is a chatterbox, he does speak frantically and he's almost overwhelmed by everything. That comes across really well as well. And the other characters do the same too. One of the things, while we're still talking about Finn, is that The Force Awakens, there's a theory about his relationship with Poe Dameron. The Last Jedi kind of avoided that, and we don't know where that's going with The Rise of Skywalker. This book really hints at that. So if you're a Star Wars fan that wants there to be a relationship between Poe and Finn, this book probably gives it away too much. If there isn't going to be a romantic relationship between these characters in The Rise of Skywalker, then I have to really question all the hinting in this book because it's so on the nose at times that it's right, this is clearly what's happening now. And then obviously that opens up well, what about Rose? Because Rose clearly has a thing for Finn. Rose is in this book as well. Again, she's just kind of there. She doesn't have much to do at all. And speaking of hinting, Leia. Leia's probably the big question mark about The Rise of Skywalker. She is going to be in it using old footage, unused footage from The Force Awakens, and I think The Last Jedi as well. What role is she going to have? How big a role is she going to have? Well, it's often hinted at, and this could be potential spoilers, but obviously I don't know for certain, so just be warned. Leia is not 100%. After the events of The Last Jedi, when she went out into space and done that horrible, horrible thing of the Mary Poppins moment that should never have been in the film, but it's happened, done, let's move on. Not here to criticise The Last Jedi. But the bottom line is, after that event, Leia is not 100%, and this book keeps diving into that, and it's hinting that maybe she's ill, maybe things aren't going to turn out quite so well for her. Maybe that's what her fate is going to be in The Rise of Skywalker. I don't know. So, one of the big kind of disappointing things is that while this does feel like a culmination for the expanded universe, it also feels very much like a setup for what's next to come. You've got all these characters from different books and comics and so on, but none of them get much in the way of closure. So this does feel like part one of a larger story. Maybe we are going to get more set between Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker at some point in the future. But there are characters here who are cropping up doing their thing, but then it's right, what next? Because chances are a lot of these characters aren't going to actually be in The Rise of Skywalker. So yeah, that's a little disappointing. We do get an idea of what they're now doing in the Resistance. It's just, is that it? That's all their character is now. But yeah, that's all I'm going to talk about this book. I do recommend it if you're going to see Rise of Skywalker. It does, I think, a good job of setting things up and explaining how they go from this one ship to a fleet, maybe. And I think there's plenty more yet to come. There's still a lot of story left there, but it's a really good start. And yeah, if you've liked this review, I'm Grant Burton. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @the_Grant Burton, or most importantly, subscribe to my channel. If you like this content and you want more of this content, give me that subscription. It means a lot to me. And until next time, though, that's all I've got for now. So thanks for watching.